In this video, we're going to be talking about the product adoption cycle. Now, this is a helpful tool, particularly at the early stage of a venture when we're trying to kind of identify our markets. Understanding this process simply helps to kind of convey the importance of strategy early on and really what the process is like from the early stages to later on when the business is obviously on a more stable footing. And so we're going to be walking through this particular cycle here. And this is really something that has sort of been adopted from Geoffrey Moore, who wrote a very popular book called Crossing the Chasm, which is all about migrating to kind of the later stages of the adoption cycle and really how challenging it is. Now, if you've taken a business course before, you're probably familiar with the product life cycle. This is very similar to that, although the focus here really is on primarily the customer. So let's talk about this particular cycle here. We're going to go through the different stages and really what's important for the entrepreneur at the various stages of the cycle. So to start us off here, we're going to be kind of in this area, which is where we start. And to give you a little bit of a description of each of the particular stages and who we're targeting, right? When we first start a business, it's really important for us to focus on those people who are most in need of our product and service. The conventional wisdom early on for many people is I want to focus on the biggest market. I want to go after the biggest fish because that's where I can get the most money in return. That's the biggest opportunity. But really that's challenging because one of the things that's particularly problematic at the early stages of a venture is you don't have a lot of resources. Right? You don't have unlimited distribution channels. You don't have unlimited manufacturing capabilities. Your reach isn't very significant. And so you don't have enough resources to go after those really, really big players, those large markets. And so instead, what we want to do is we want to focus on a smaller group of customers, right? People that have the problem we're trying to solve, that are fanatical about the things that we're doing, and we want to focus on those people. So at the bottom here of the cycle, this is where I'm going to list some of the different groups. And so you have here 5 different stages. And I'm going to list as we go on who we're going to be focusing on at these different stages. And so at the beginning, this is what we call the innovators. And the innovators are really characterized by people that love to try new things, right? If there's a new technology, a new product that's out, they could know absolutely nothing about it. And hey, it's cool, it's new, I want to try it. So these people are generally what businesses try to target at the very, very early stage, because what's great about innovators is they typically are willing to pay a lot to be a part of something new. And they're usually pretty accepting of faults, which is really important early on when we haven't necessarily built like the perfect product. It's good, but it's got some kinks in it that we're trying to work out. And innovators really understand that they accept the fact that as a condition of being first at something, it's not going to be perfect. And so they're much more forgiving and willing to provide feedback. Now, as we kind of get through these particular stages here, I mentioned that we're going to start and then we're kind of work our way sort of this way. And here, this area is what we call the first crack fall. And this is between the innovators and what we call the early adopters. And so early adopters are people that are generally willing to be the first to try something. They're not necessarily as immediate as obviously innovators are, just by their very nature wanting to try new things. But they tend to adopt much sooner than the kind of main street vast majority of consumers. And so the first crack fall here is particularly problematic because we need to be able to articulate that our product has some type of compelling benefits, right? This is the first stage where we're trying to assess product market fit. And this is a term that I've mentioned before, but is really meant to kind of say, my product that solves these benefits, does it actually solve a problem? If we're able to articulate that, then we can get into the early adopter stage. If we're unable to articulate that, then typically we don't make it past this first crack here. This is when we fall and we can't progress through the product adoption cycle because, again, as we're moving here, this represents revenue. And so as we're able to cater to a wider group of customers, obviously our revenue is going to expand. Now, one strategy early on that's mentioned a lot, and I want to address it here, is what we call a beachhead. And this got its kind of name from the famous World War II Battle of Normandy, and where the Allied forces landed on the beach of Normandy and eventually were able to gain control. And it really served as a beachhead. It served as a point for resources and personnel and all these different things to land in Normandy and then to kind of spread throughout Europe, and was extremely pivotal in the Battle of World War II against Germany. So building a beachhead in business terms, right? We're not storming physical beaches and that sort of thing, but we are kind of in a way storming beaches with regards to products and markets. And so building a beachhead is all about finding those small group of customers like innovators that are more likely to receive my product in a positive way. Instead of going after the main market, I want to go after a small niche, a small group of customers that love what I do, that can help me gain revenue, gain market feedback. I can improve and optimize my product over time and make it better. And then when I'm in a place where I've got the resources, I've got a little bit more brand recognition, I've built some systems, and so I operate a little bit better, then I can focus on new markets. That's a beachhead strategy. And it's really important early on because one of the biggest issues that many early ventures have is we don't have access to a lot of capital. And so we don't want to spread ourselves too thin by launching 10 different products or focusing on 3 different markets. We want to pour our energy and our resources into one thing and do that almost obsessively. And then if we're successful, if we solve a problem, then we can move to the later stages. Now, kind of going back to the product adoption cycle, this here is what we call, this is the chasm. And in Geoffrey Moore's book, he talks a lot about crossing the chasm, which is this divide that takes place between the early adopters and the early majority. And this is the most difficult thing for a business to get over. It's extremely challenging to do because this is where we're actually getting from the people that, there's a solid group of people that really love what we do, and we're able to reach our primary target market. And so notice that there's a lot more opportunity here, right? There's a lot more opportunity in this stage here, but the only way that we can acquire the resources and get into a position where we have a product that's ready for this group, the early majority, is if we actually cross the chasm. So what are the things that we need to do to actually cross the chasm? Well, there's a couple of things, right? The first thing we need to do is we need to finalize our product. And I'm gonna make a list over here. Our product needs to be market ready. It can't be a beta. It can't be something that we're testing. We're still trying to work out the kinks. I mean, this product is ready to go. So we have to be able to finalize our product, which is the value in the innovator and early adopter stage, is we have a little bit more flexibility there. We can do market testing. We can get feedback without completely tanking our brand. If we get into trying to cross the chasm with a beta version, it's absolutely going to ruin us if it's not ready. The second thing we need to do is we need to work on positioning. We have to position our product in a way that it appeals to the primary target market. Again, going back to the early stages, this is the importance of testing and experimentation, right? We can test different messages. If we have a website, we can change our value proposition statements. We can figure out what resonates more with customers. And then once we figure out the formula, right, what works, then that's a matter of replicating that over and over again with our primary target market. The last thing that we need to do is we need to work on the distribution. We have to be able to distribute through the right channels. And again, this all goes back to understanding our customer, because if we know who they are, then we're going to know what are the channels that we have to distribute through. And so you're kind of seeing kind of the importance of understanding who our customer is and all of those sorts of things play out here. Is it makes it a lot easier to address these three questions. We know the feature set that needs to be included in our products. We know the way that we need to market it, and we know the way that we need to get it to consumers, whether that's through third-party retail, whether that's through an e-commerce channel direct. We've finalized all those sorts of things. So addressing that is what helps us to cross this divide, this chasm right here, and ultimately get us into the kind of early majority of people, which are looking for products that are functioning. They want things that work. They won't accept mediocrity. It needs to actually work and help us get there. And if we're able to do that, eventually we get through this early majority stage. And then eventually, at some point, all products start to get into the late majority, which are the people that generally will adopt after everyone else has for the most part. And they're now seeing it everywhere. They see their neighbors have something like it, and they realize, well, maybe I should actually adopt. And then eventually you've got what we call the laggards, which are the last people, right? These are the people that generally, once the product is being phased out and something newer is coming in, then they're finally adopting like the old technology or the old product. And so we're not necessarily focusing on them per se. But obviously, as we kind of progress through, then, we can attract them. Interesting thing is, as we're moving through this cycle, our marketing strategies often change. And I don't want to get into that too much because that's a pretty lengthy discussion. But as we're kind of progressing into the late majority and then eventually kind of moving down into the laggards, things like promotion, things like pricing become even more important. And so when we get into the late majority and the laggards, we're often reducing prices because these people need lower barriers to entry to adopt. And hopefully we've picked up some market efficiencies and economies of scale that allow us to execute on those. But that's really kind of roughly the product adoption cycle. And so understanding the stages that we go through is really important for understanding what we need to do at each and every stage. What are the things that are important? And then ultimately, when our product kind of makes its way through the cycle, how do we support it? When we're in these final stages here, and we cross into laggards, we maybe aren't going to spend a ton of money on promotion and marketing and those sorts of things because we've probably already built a pretty visible brand. And really, this kind of becomes, in a way, if you were to look at it from the Boston Consulting Group, the BCG matrix, this becomes almost like a cash cow, right? So we want to reduce support as much as possible. We're basically kind of harvesting this product for as much cash. And then ideally, we've got something else that we're putting into the start phase here, working its way through the cycle that allows us to diversify our revenue. But that's getting way ahead down the road, of course. It could be years to actually make it all the way through, although depending upon the technology, could be relatively quick for sure. So anyways, just to recap here, again, the product adoption cycle is all about understanding what are the important activities that we need to do to be able to attract different consumers. As we've discussed, crossing the chasm between early adopters and the early majority is extremely important. And so to prepare for that, we want to spend plenty of time testing our ideas, testing hypotheses, testing our assumptions, trying to figure out what works, ultimately trying to finalize our product, finalize our positioning, work out our distribution, and then hopefully once we do those things, then we're prepared to appeal to a bigger market. But until then, we really want to focus on developing this beachhead here and going after the smaller subset group of consumers that are going to be more favorable to our product. And then we can focus on trying to cross the chasm.